Well, it is a pleasure to be here today. Obviously, where we're standing is a very important place for cotton. It's kind of the bedrock of U.S. cotton. And water is also obviously a very important thing for West Texas. And so at Cotton Incorporated, we have invested a lot of resources into irrigation research. And so I want to highlight some of that, as well as talk about an overall water strategy that our company has for agriculture, and then give some examples of some projects that we've had in West Texas that fit into that water strategy. Also, Rick asked me to say a little bit about the economic outlook for cotton, and I'm an engineer, I am not an economist, so I talked to our senior economist and got some points from him, and I'll go over that very quickly. And then the last thing I want to finish up with, I'm going to go through some of these things kind of fast, but we have been, over the last 2 years, spending a lot of time trying to build the online resources, our websites up, so that you have faster information to the research that we're sponsoring. So I want to spend a little time and make sure you're aware of that as well. So when I talk about our water strategy, there's 4 parts to it. And I've kind of color-coded them. That's why those circles are different colors. So when the heading of the slide right now, you see it's blue. When I'm talking about water capture, it's going to be orange. When I'm talking about optimizing irrigation, it's going to be gray. Green for breeding. And then when we talk about measuring, it's going to be blue. So as we go through this, I also want to acknowledge I have learned a lot from over the last 14 years traveling here and hearing from the experts. Definitely in the southern United States, the best irrigation experts in the country are centered in this area. You guys are very lucky to have the talent you have both at Texas Tech and Texas A&M as well as at ARS. So it's really encouraging that there's all these resources concentrated in this area where it's very definitely needed. And I'll call out some of these people because I stole some of their slides to share with you today. One of the things I want you to know, sometimes we can feel all alone when things are going wrong. And so, we all hear about the Ogallala, about, the problems we're facing of the water drawdown and the water stress that's here in West Texas. In this map, what I've done is I've drawn boundaries around all the cotton-producing states and the top 3 cotton-producing countries. So here's the U.S., India, and China. When you look at India and China, we are not alone, okay? They are facing water deficit challenges all through the cotton growing areas of India, and now China's moving most of its production to western China, which is basically near the Gobi Desert. And so every country growing cotton is facing water challenges. And sometimes our critics want to turn that around on us and use the example of the aerial sea and say cotton, is a water hog. And we've been making a big effort to point out to them, cotton is grown in these areas because it's heat and drought tolerant. That is the reason why you're going to find cotton in water-stressed areas, not because it's creating the water stress. It's often the only crop that some producers can grow. So we try to get that message across. And the other thing, we try to step back and say, hey, when you look at all the water use for agriculture, this is just for agriculture in the world, cotton's only about 3% of that, all right? So let's give cotton a break. We'll say more about that later. But that brings us back to our water strategy. So again, there's 4 parts to it. Again, if we have rainfall, we don't want that to go to waste. If we're using irrigation water, we want to optimize the heck out of it. And I know you guys, we've already heard from the speakers today, a lot of that's already going on here. One of the things about the hope for the future that's in the title is about this increasing plant water use efficiency. Some of that's through agronomics, some of that's through breeding. So I want to share some of the exciting things going on there. And then finally, about evaluating our progress with good measures of what we're doing. So water capture. Now, I got to admit, I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of years trying to get our guys in the Mid-South and Southeast up to speed on irrigation. They have really gotten increased amounts of irrigation in that region, and they don't have the experience that you do. So one of the things, they have the advantage, they have in Mississippi and even in parts of Georgia, 50 inches of rainfall a year. And you might say, why do you need to irrigate? But the problem is, as just like here, it doesn't all fall at the right time. So we talk to them a lot about farm ponds, tailwater recovery, capturing. And so, how does that fit out here in West Texas? And this is my boss, Dr. Cater Hake, and this is my chance to call him a dog, because I say every time we take him into the field, he digs a hole, all right? So he's a crop physiologist, a kind of soil scientist, and so that's him digging a hole. But what he's looking at, there's a field that's been in long-term conservation tillage, and from the reduced tillage and the use of cover crops, where you see the organic matter build, and that becomes an important part of increasing water capture. And so if we look at some studies in Texas that are very recent, one, this is from Dr. Srini Ali, who is with Texas A&M at the Vernon Station, and he's a modeler. And don't spit on him right away, because we know all models are wrong, but some models are useful. All right. So Dr. Ali has taken a cotton model, kind of like if you've heard of Gossam Comax. This is a similar model to that in the DSAT family. It's a family of crop models that also includes wheat. So what he did is use data from the field and used about 4 years of data to calibrate a cotton model and a wheat model. And then with both those models, ran them in where you grow cotton and grow wheat for a cover crop, terminate it, grow cotton. He did that over 15 years of weather records in the rolling plains. And what his simulation showed, and again, remember the model was calibrated, this wasn't just random number generator. And it's kind of hard to see, but basically, even in a wet year, normal year, dry year, whether it was at this top is irrigated, this is dry land, the blue is without a wheat cover crop, the red is with a wheat cover crop. Did not see the model predict any differences in having that wheat cover crop. And the question we were trying to answer, and I've heard this debate out here before, is a cover crop in the winter going to use up all the water so that when you grow that cash crop in the summer, you don't have that winter storage? And this model is saying that doesn't look to be an issue in this region. And the other thing, I've heard the debate on furrow diking, not furrow diking. So I think really cover crops can have a role to play in this, kind of reinforcing that. Dr. Paul Dillon, also at Vernon, has done a lot of good field studies, and this is just an example of one of his 2015 results. And what we have here is 4 tillage systems, conventional, strip, no-till, and no-till with a cover crop. And then he's done that across 3 different irrigation levels, all right? So kind of a low, a medium, and a high. And one of the points I take from this slide is under low water conditions, tillage really starts to matter. And one of my hypotheses here, and Paul may correct me if I'm wrong, but when we're reducing that tillage, especially with the cover crop, it's just doing a better job of capturing that rainfall and making sure nothing runs off. If you have plenty of water, tillage is not a big issue. You can put that water on, and if you lose some in the rainfall, not a problem. But again, we all know we're moving towards more limited water conditions, and that's where we really want to start thinking about, do I need to change my tillage system? Now, moving along from water capture to precision delivery, we heard some great presentations this morning by Glenn and David about all the different drip systems and surface systems. I'm going to call out Jim Berdowski later, but Jim is a researcher at Halfway, Texas, has done tremendous work on drip irrigation, LIPA, LISA, everything, and has really given us some solid data on these systems. So really, West Texas, you guys should be very proud of, you're the leaders in really establishing what precision application looks like. And the newest thing coming online, are the ability to do variable rate irrigation. And one of the things, and I know some of the companies out here have systems, the wedge system where you could manage, just the wedge of the pivot So you'd speed it up in certain sections and slow it down. Is a very low-cost modification and something I'd encourage everybody to give some thought to, because again, it's not a huge investment, but it could have some huge benefits. And Glenn showed an example. The other thing you need to know before you even think about this is how much variability is in your field. So Glenn showed one of his fields where it just looked like no variability, which I fly into Lubbock at least, seems like 3 times a year for the last 14 years, and I look out the window a lot. And there are some, I do see variability in some of these fields, so not all of you are blessed with a perfectly uniform field. So I think, just even getting on Google Earth or Google Maps and pulling up some imagery of your fields, start to see, do you see some variations in colors? If you're going to go out and buy one of these new, $700,000 plus round module building strippers, go ahead and spend that extra $8,000 and get the yield monitor, and that will help you start seeing, is this, even a wedge management, or is it even worth going with even more detailed variable rate management on your fields? I just can't say enough positive about yield monitors, and not only for making decisions about whether do you need to variable rate irrigate, do you have other problems in your field that you may not be noticing, or you notice them when you're riding on the stripper, but then you got so much going on they're forgot about later. That yield monitor will capture that information for you so that you can think about it when you're not in the heat of battle. So beyond precision delivery, precision timing, we've heard some great comments on AquaSpy and some of the soil moisture sensors. I'll say more about that. I had to call out SmartField. They're a Lubbock-based company. Many of you have probably been introduced to them, where they're using infrared thermometers to detect canopy temperature and determine, as the plant starts to run out of water, it can't transpire as much, so it can't cool itself as much. And that's proven to be a very good early indicator of drought stress and the need to irrigate, so we're listening to the plant. This isn't in your handout. This is one I forgot to add in, and I almost didn't put it in because we really developed, like I said, we're trying to make sure our producers in the Mid-South and Southeast can get up to speed where they haven't given as much thought to irrigation in the past. And so we did do a publication on just the use of soil moisture sensors. And some of this came out of the last 5 years. We've gone on producer farms, kind of like that you have been doing here with the Texas Water Alliance, and putting sensors in producers' fields and letting them get an experience with it. And the game changer for me, and why I think, these sensors have been around for 20 years or more. We've used them in research for a long time, but nobody wanted to go out into their, 40 different fields every day to read them. And so affordable wireless data transmission is a huge game changer, but it's also dangerous. And I learned the hard way. I'll just tell a quick story. When we had a field study in Arkansas, and working with one of the guys there on a research farm, and we were supposed to have kind of an irrigated check. It was going to be our optimal condition. And we had some of these wireless sensors out there, and it was fun for me because I could look at it too, even though I was in North Carolina. And I'd check it on occasion. It's getting towards August when it's still a pretty critical demand time. And I called up the student, said, "Why are you not irrigating right now? I mean, we need to keep that check wet." And he said, "No, I did irrigate." And I said, he said, "The farm told me they irrigated. Are you sure they irrigated the right field? We've had some communication problems." And he said, "They told me they irrigated." So it happened to be I was going out there the next week and went out there and got a shovel, and the furrow is nice and wet, and the end row is as dry as anything. And so, I know y'all still have some furrow irrigation around here. One of the big challenges we've seen with furrow irrigation is really understanding what's happening. Because what was happening in this situation, early season, those furrows had good infiltration rates. We've got a lot of lateral dispersion out of the furrow into the rows. But as the season went on, those furrows became like concrete ditches. And that water just started running straight off the field. And so we were putting irrigation down, and it was just running right through the field, and nobody really was noticing that. And so I can't say enough about the value of soil moisture monitoring. We've already heard there's things going underground that we don't see. and they can really alert us to some things where maybe our assumptions about what's really happening is not what's going on. The other thing about placing these sensors is critical. Like in that study, in that free irrigated study, we had placed the sensors in the row, and so that was part of the problem. We weren't detecting some of the moisture that was in the furrow that probably was available to the plant. But it also pointed out our infiltration problems and some soil health problems. And so thinking about where, ideally, it seems like the simplest thing is put that sensor in the row because that's the least probability, least probability you're going to run that over. But in some systems, that's not the right place to put it. We even had a situation with bedded cotton, with sprinkler irrigation, or again, the soil sealed over and the water just ran off the bed into the furrow. And so those sensors weren't even picking up some of the sprinkler irrigation. And these things are important to think about ahead of time, especially if you're demonstrating, if you're a consultant or extension worker trying to do a farm demonstration with a producer. I can tell you we did not make some good impressions on some of our producers when we showed them your field's dry and they told us they just irrigated. All right, so we definitely want to get those things sorted out. Another thing that's not in here, and I really meant to put this slide in, but we did a survey in 2015 of all the cotton producers in the United States, and one of the questions we asked them is what's your irrigated yield? What do you estimate your non-irrigated yield to be, and how much water did you apply? And did you use sensors to manage? Did you use schedulers to manage? How did you manage your water? And so when we combined all the data across the country for irrigated producers, this was a very interesting result to me. Here we have irrigation water use efficiency, and you were introduced to this term earlier. This is an important value. It's the amount of, so it's the yield minus, if you have a non-irrigated yield, divided by the irrigation applied. So it's really trying to capture the value of that irrigation water. So we're getting, with the producers who weren't using the sensor, we're getting about 50 pounds per acre, per acre inch, and the producers using sensors for management were getting 55. So they were gaining on water use efficiency, but also on absolute yield. So it wasn't they were just stressing their crop and really using less water to get a better water use efficiency. We saw a difference in yield too. Now, is that a smoking gun? Can I go out and tell you if you put in a sensor you're going to get a 100-pound yield bump? No, it probably is also a reflection of that some of the producers that have invested in sensors are very management intensive. So it's broader than that, but this is still, I think, a good indicator that there is value to go into the trouble to mess around with these sensors. And I was very glad to hear from our last speaker that NRCS can give some support to help you afford the initial investment in those sensors. I think that will pay off. For people that aren't ready to make the plunge into investing in a sensor, this is a new app that's going to be coming out hopefully in March or April. There's a website address here, Smart Irrigation Apps. This app exists right now, but it only works in Georgia and Florida because it relies on their weather network. And so this is a very simple app, basically does a crop ET estimate using a Penman reference ET and a crop coefficient, and does a simple water balance. But we have pushing this one for producers who don't think they need to do any irrigation scheduling. So the idea, we're hoping this would be kind of a gateway drug to thinking more about irrigation scheduling. If you could use this simple app, try it out. Now, where I would appreciate anybody in this room that already has some pretty significant experience irrigation scheduling to try this app out. Don't schedule by it because we haven't calibrated it strongly for West Texas, but that's what we're trying to get. And that's why I got Charles Hillier as a new irrigation specialist up in Amarillo. He's agreed to help look at this. And I've also just talked with Wen-Xuan Zhao, who's sitting down front here, about maybe doing some evaluations with it around Lubbock to see how we need to adjust the crop coefficients for this region. But what's nice about this app, The new one is it's going to tap into the National Weather Service grid, and so it's not going to need a weather station network. The Weather Service now provides something they call forecasted reference ET, so we can use that as an estimate for the reference ET for the day. And then there's also a grid on data on temperature and rainfall. Although the rainfall one you may be a little iffy, but still it gives us a national database. So this app we don't have to have an app for every state. And not to say some of your local apps aren't still valuable, but this is one I think as a cotton industry we'll continue to invest in so that we can have one app that will hopefully service a large geographic area. And this is, pull out one of Jim Brodowski's slides. You know, Jim not only did a lot of work on irrigation systems, on drip versus LIPA, he's also done a lot of work on the best timing. If you got a limited amount of water, and that's the challenge I have a hard time getting my head around, the challenges you're facing here in West Texas, when you know you're not going to have enough water to meet what that crop wants for the season. So what do you do with that? And so Jim's done some great work. And you know, one of his latest studies showed very conclusively that dumping out of a bunch of water, trying to build up the soil profile early in the season is not the greatest value for your water. They're really holding off on that water. Once you get flowering going later in the season, that's when you're going to maximize your value in water. Another study he just showed, and this is on a bigger rotation study, but I found it very interesting, that if you just have a little bit of water and you try to spread it out, this is water use efficiency. Again, we were talking about pounds of cotton per acre inch. With just a little bit of water, we're getting really low water value. These are 3 different years. And you know, 25, 50 is getting more respectable. But as he starts to increase that amount of water and concentrate that water, we're seeing a lot more. We're getting up to 50 to even almost 100 pounds of fiber per acre inch. And so this is, you know, a really important thing to be keeping in mind, the value. And you heard Glenn talk about how his corn, when he realized his pivot wasn't going to have enough water to meet his corn needs, he decided to cut back on the area. So this is something really important to keep in mind, and I'm sure Jim can give you a lot more details on this study. The other thing I want to point out, and I think you guys are probably in this room have more likelihood of understanding this concept of pounds per acre inch. But you know, that's one I think it's really important to think about. A number of 50 pounds per acre inch is pretty achievable for most systems. And so if you're not looking at that number for what you're doing, I would encourage you to do it. If you find you're not hitting 50, that could be an indication that you have a problem. If you're way below 50, and there could be other problems. There could be fertility. There could be insect damage. So it may not just be a water problem. But if you're below 50 and have a higher yield, that's probably a water problem. All right? If you're way above 50, if you're getting up into 100, I wouldn't be surprised if you're deficit irrigating, you're going to be pushing the upper limit of this range, because it means you're kind of on that really steep part of the curve and you're getting a lot of value from that water. Now, if you had more water, I'd say put out more water, because you want to go ahead and get that additional yield. But if you don't have the water, then at least you're getting the maximum value from it. So let's change gears a little bit. I think I just saw Dr. Ritchie walk in. He'll be speaking to us later. So let's talk a little bit about hope for the future. Again, we all know we're going to be challenged with less water in the future. And so there are a lot of research projects around the country, and especially concentrated here in Texas, looking at how can we make cotton even more drought tolerant. We've already established it is a drought tolerant crop. So there's a lot of efforts going on right now to continue to push that plant to get as much out of that water as we can. And so here's one example. Phenotyping is basically they're using all these crazy sensors, and Glenn may say a little bit more about it later, but in research plots to measure a bunch of different varieties and cultivars of cotton, and to look at one of the things they're looking at are what are the ones that are most drought tolerant, so the breeders can select for that. And so Glenn has a project here in Lubbock. There's also a part of that project in College Station and in Corpus Christi, so we've got a good geographic coverage on that across Texas. Another thing that is exciting to me, and sometimes I get the most excited about the things I understand the least, right? So I don't know all the problems, but you know, there has been tremendous progress made on sequencing the cotton genome. This is something Dr. Don Jones at Cotton Incorporated kind of leads the effort on. And what that means is we understand more and more about what the genes in cotton do. That means we're going to be much more efficient and fast in selecting better varieties and in being able to, you know, genetically engineer traits into that cotton that we want, including drought tolerance. So that's something that I'm excited about and I think is going to give us a lot of continued benefits in the future. Along with that, just point out that here with the Water Stress Lab in Lubbock, they are also doing a lot of screening for different varieties, genetic manipulations. Again, trying to make sure as we lose our capacity to irrigate or our water, you know, our pumping rates decline, we can minimize that impact on productivity. Now let's change to our fourth part of the strategy, measurement, and I'm going to add the word messaging. And this was really set up great by Ted when he was talking about the sustainable beef effort, and he alluded to field to market. The National Cotton Council was one of the founding members of the group that eventually became Field to Market. Cotton Incorporated joined a year later, and so we have invested a lot in this effort. Field to Market is not just commodity groups, it is every commodity group: corn, cotton, soybeans. I think sorghum just joined, peanuts, but it's Monsanto, Syngenta, BASF are members. NRCS is a very important member in that. There's universities. Texas A&M just became an affiliate member. And then we have the Environmental Defense Fund, World Wildlife Fund, Nature Conservancy, Kellogg's, McDonald's, Coke. So talk about a diverse audience. And so we are trying to work together to come to agreement on how we are going to define progress towards sustainable agricultural production. And this one example is kind of what they use, as they call it a spidergram, and these are the different resource concerns, so land use, greenhouse gas emissions, energy, soil erosion, and water use. And one of the best stories for U.S. cotton is the gains we have made in irrigation water use efficiency. If you look where we were back in the 1980s, that's this blue line. We've made consistent progress every 5 years. Even this last year was a tough one. You guys experienced the toughness of it in 2011, 2012. Also, we had major droughts in California. And despite all that, we did lose a little ground on land use efficiency because yields went down. But we still maintained increasing water use efficiency, which is a great message for us to share with your customers, whether that be Walmart or Target or whoever. Again, on messaging, we are trying to tell the story, the positive story of what's going on here. We have, if you go to cottontoday.cottoninc.com, you can just, if you hit on collateral or videos, you'll get a list of videos, and there's 2 of them on water. This one's just a really short animation. This one I want to call, it's like a 15-minute video, and it doesn't just talk about agriculture. It talks about progress we're making in water conservation on the textile processing side as well. But we really want to thank Rick Kellison. A couple years ago, helped us take a video crew from La Mesa up to Amarillo and really film some of the great things that's going on in West Texas in terms of improving water use efficiency. And so you'll see some of the names. You ought to see some familiar names up there that are all movie stars now in this video. And so if you want to see how good they look on camera, you can pull that video off of our website. And again, these are just some ways that we're trying to tell the water story. Now step back and just, I don't think anybody's going to talk about cotton prices today, but John Devine's our senior economist, so I asked him to, give me a synopsis. So he gave me, the 2 slides in your handout are more detailed. I asked him, can you boil that down to something an engineer can understand? And so this is what he gave me. And so basically, if you've been monitoring cotton prices, China. They still have a lot of cotton in reserves. They're starting to pull that cotton out of reserves. And so that's probably going to reduce their import interest. All right, that's not a positive. That's going to keep prices from shooting up. We had some relief this year because of failures in Pakistan and India. But we're seeing a lot of countries outside of China looking at increasing their acreages this year. Australia is looking to have a very good year. So we're going to see an up on the supply side. And so, unfortunately, what we don't see is really a big move in prices much beyond where we're at right now in the low 70 cent range, which isn't great hope for the future. But what I will say is in the long term, one of our problems is oversupply of polyester in China. And so at Cotton Incorporated, our marketing team, that is their focus, is to recapture that market share. And you'll see now we're really working with USDA. Our hands are a little bit tied on how aggressive we can be addressing polyester, because by law we can't disparage another fiber, but we can state facts, all right? And so if you look, we have a little video burst out there right now on social media. A lady's jogging, and she's got a polyester jogging shirt on, and we've got data that proves that polyester will hold body odor longer and that you can't wash it out. And so as she's wandering under these power lines, these birds are falling over dead from the smell from her stinky polyester shirt, okay? So we've got another one that's going to talk about cotton is a natural fiber, polyester is made from chemicals. So we're not sure that one's going to get by a USDA, but we're pushing it, okay? The other thing that I don't want to say too much about, but again, looking long term, polyesters derive from petroleum, and that's a limited resource. The other thing that is coming out in the scientific literature now is they're starting to find a lot of the plastics that they're detecting in the oceans and they're finding in fish are coming from polyester fibers that break off in the laundering process. And there's indications this could be a huge environmental concern. Now, I'm not really happy about the fish getting all this polyester in their body, but I am kind of happy that the consumer is going to have one more reason to think about cotton as a natural fiber. And as that story unfolds, we're tracking it very closely. And again, we'll hopefully be able to use the sustainability story to recapture additional market share. So there's some of our hope. Finally, I just want to finish up and make sure you're aware of some web-based resources that we have now. The first one and the most important, Cotton Cultivated, one word, .cottoninc.com. There's also a link to it on our main site. But what this site is focused on is really trying to make sure that all the research that's going on around the U.S. on cotton is available from one place. This is a special search bar. It's just like a Google search, and it does use a Google search engine, but we've limited the domains that it searches to mainly things like land-grant universities in the South. So if you won't, hopefully this will pull up less extraneous things than you would find on a regular Google search. We also have a lot of our multimedia. We're going to start having some how-to videos on simple things like sweep nets, and one of the things I want to get on there is the right way to install a soil moisture sensor, some really short 2-minute videos. We now have a weekly weather update. I know we're going to hear from a climatologist later, but every week we have a kind of a synopsis of what the week ahead looks for the Cotton Belt, and that's updated every Thursday morning. So if you go Thursday afternoon, that ought to be a new weather video. If you scroll down the page, you'll see there's reports. We have that report on soil moisture sensors is there, and another report on irrigation for cotton is there. And we also have cultivated sites where we feel like very valuable websites from other institutions like Texas A&M and Texas Tech and the Texas Water Alliance. So those resources have all been compiled. So some examples of what's linked there. The other thing we have that you can get to that site, or you can just Google Focus on Cotton, are these webcasts. And these are, I think, really nice that we have someone that's doing cotton research give a PowerPoint presentation of their current research, and we post it online. And so, and it's not just a video, it's an interactive system so that you can see a list of their slides. And for example, if they're talking about water management, you don't need to hear about the importance of water management, so you can skip the first 10 slides and just click on the 11th and it'll jump to that slide and hear what they have to say. One of the recent ones we just posted, this isn't water related, but you know, there was a annual West Texas Ag Chem Institute meeting here in December, and we actually recorded some of the presentations from that. So if you weren't able to make that conference and wanted to see some of the discussions that was held, that's available from this site as well. Another thing, kind of on the sustainability front, I just threw up there, we just finished a life cycle assessment for cotton. That report's up there if you want to see what it's about. So again, we're really trying to make this site a way to rapidly deliver some of these research results and make them available to you on as real-time basis as possible. So with that, that's all I got, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And this is an important conference, and really appreciate the work that everybody in this room is doing to maximize water use efficiency. So with that, if there's any questions, or I'll turn it back over. Thanks.